our weekly wrap up. This week we had a fun filled week, starting off with a visit from the Arlington Heights Bookmobile. The Bookmobile is a traveling library that visits Post School every Monday afternoon, and the students in our class were able to hear a little bit about the Bookmobile from the people who drive it and bring it around, as well as check out some books that will stay here in our classroom and just get to see the amazing things that the local community does for our students and for our area. We used those books this week and others to identify characters in our reading. So characters are either people, animals, or creatures who are in the books that we read or the books that we write. And they are characters if they can think, if they can feel, and if they can talk or move on their own. And so this past week we explored that. This week we're adding on that and the next layer of story elements, and we'll be diving into setting, so where the story takes place and when the story takes place. And those two things are the most concrete elements that make up a story that we're reading or that we're writing. So the characters, who are they, and where the story takes place. We also tried to then implement that in our writing this week as we're writing our narratives, creating our characters who are typically the humans that we interact with because we're writing personal narratives, things that have happened to us. So how can we bring our stories to life by making our characters think and feel and talk and move? In math this week, we explored two different things. We explored combinations that make 10. So those are two numbers that when you add them together, they equal 10. And so you'll see over the next few days, you'll see some things that come home where 1 and 9 are a combination that makes 10, 5 and 5, a combination that makes 10, 3 and 7, a combination that makes 10. When we're learning to add, knowing those combinations helps us to look for friendly numbers because they're easy to know. 7 and 3, always going to be 10, or 3 and 7, it's always going to be 10. So we did some exploring with that. And then later on in the week, we started looking at coins. We won't spend a bunch of time using coins like pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters, but that is something that here in the United States typically are things that they need to know or know how to use when they're purchasing things here at school, like book fare or even their lunch. They occasionally need to have money with them, and they need to know how much money they have. And going on into the future, that's going to be a skill that they're going to need. So we did spend a little bit of time this past week looking at how much is a penny worth, how much is a nickel worth, how much is a dime worth, how much is a quarter worth. And really right now we're trying to differentiate between what those coins are. So when we see them, do we know what they are and do we know how much they cost? So really we're working on identifying the coin and the value. And then as we go on, again, it's not something that is very focused on in our math curriculum, but it is a skill that is important for the rest of their lives. We'll work on counting, so how to add up the coins that we might have. In social studies, we finished up our maps and globes, comparing and identifying maps and globes, and then we continue to look at, in our global read aloud, where our story took place and where that was on the map. This week in social studies, we'll look a little bit closer at maps and globes and identifying the land and water, so the continents that are on the map or the globe, and then the oceans that are on the map and globe. And so we'll look at identifying the 7 continents and then the 5 oceans. All right, I think that wraps up the week. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via email or through the Class Dojo. Have a wonderful weekend.